here's a summary for those of you who don't have time to watch this entire video. High-minded intellectualism, brain posting on Twitter, on Facebook, these will not work for the intactivist movement. What we need to do is we need to threaten society at large. We need to pose a credible threat, and posting online just doesn't do it. I applaud anybody who's on Twitter, constantly reposting and retweeting intactivists, but I don't think that our views get very far outside of our own echo chamber, and so we need to aim for more in real life shitposting. That is the point of today's video. So let's start with why the high-minded intellectualism will not work. It's been said that people are perfectly rational right up until the point where the topic being discussed actually matters. And then they react emotionally, and they only use their forebrains for post hoc rationalizations. There's a long history of the human race, if you believe in evolution. For most of the time when our different ancestors were alive, all decisions were made by the hindbrain, and that's probably still true today. The fish doesn't go and eat food because it has a construct of what food means and how it's valuable for the fish to nibble on it. No, the fish acts on instinct, and that's the hindbrain. That's the midbrain, the emotional response in humans. The forebrain is a newer bolt-on that's much younger and much weaker than the hindbrain. For anyone who doubts this, I strongly suggest you read The Power of Habit. It turns out that most of our decisions on a day-to-day basis are made based on the decisions that we've made in the past, our own habits, our mood at the time. There's actually very little decision making that you're doing on any given day at any given time. For those of you who think, well, I'm really smart and my hindbrain's really powerful, here's my challenge to you. Hold your breath for 3 minutes. I'm not going to wait. Pause the video. Hold your breath. Okay, so I'm assuming most of you could not hold your breath for 3 minutes. Interestingly, this video is just passing the 3-minute mark by my clock. So why couldn't you hold your breath? Because your hindbrain is stronger than your forebrain. You could think, hold your breath as long as you want. Most of you will not be able to force yourselves to pass out by not breathing. And most of you don't want to. So most of our decisions are in accord with our hindbrain. We can see this play out in Circumcision. It's fairly obvious. You corner your uncle who's about to have a child, or your cousin or whatever, and you give them all the reasons that circumcision is bad. You talk about how it was originally proposed as a way to hurt the male sexual responsiveness, to hurt the penis. You talk about how we have new ideas about sexuality now. You talk about how there's a long history of the anti-masturbation movement, and that's where this all comes from. You talk about how necessarily, if you cut off a part of a baby's penis, the baby's penis is harmed by that. Just like if you cut off the hand, the arm is harmed by that. The arm is lesser without the hand. Well, a baby's penis and a man's penis is lesser without the rest of the penis. You give all these reasons. And at the end of that, your cousin looks at you and says, but the doctors said the benefits outweigh the risks. What just happened? Your cousin was faced with the possibility of considering how he had been harmed by circumcision. He found, at an unconscious level, he found that horrifying. He didn't want to go there. And so his hindbrain came up with a defense mechanism where he just ignores it, denies whatever you said, doesn't present an argument, and takes the sound bite that he's heard elsewhere, and that's your post hoc rationalization, and says benefits outweigh the risks. Just to show how little the forebrain is doing there, you can probe him, and he probably doesn't really understand in much depth what he means when he says it. He probably doesn't really get the benefits, can't really explain them, and when he says risks, doesn't really know what he means by that. Especially when, in the face of your description of actual harms, not risks, not possibilities, but things that will happen. Not to belabor the point. Okay, so when you present an argument online, it's very high-minded. Brian Earp posts another bioethicist essay on how circumcision is bad and unethical. That's great. Some people read it. It makes no impact on the broader public consciousness. And I would say that a big reason for that is that it doesn't actually affect the decision-making process in any meaningful way. And academia and the medical community that want to continue doing infant circumcision because it makes them money, they're happy to just cherry pick. They'll just ignore it. They'll say, oh, Brian Earp is a kook. He's anti-Semitic. Don't go and read him. It's a waste of your time. And the benefits outweigh the risks. Benefits outweigh the risks. It's a great soundbite. It's really good propaganda. Works a lot of the time. So we're not going to, as it were, Martin Luther King our way into a circumcision ban. We're not going to get the practice banned. We're not going to make victims whole, and we are not going to bring perpetrators to justice by being high-minded and waiting for the power of our logical arguments to convince people. Okay? It's not going to happen. What we need to do is we need to find, I'm just going to say it. We need to find our circumcision Hitler. We need to find our Benito circumcision delenda est Mussolini. We need to find our Goebbels of circumcision. And we need to start credibly threatening the public with some sort of a massive catastrophe. At this point, I think it's important that we turn and look at Gregory Malchuk. Gregory Malchuk, since about a year ago, with his video Pouring Sand into the Gears of Civilization, has been pushing for what I think is a very effective way to attack society. Here it is. Societies are built on families. The family is the cornerstone of civilization. It cannot exist without that fundamental subunit. Okay? So, we attack the family. How do we attack the family? We expose children, or we threaten to expose children to the truth about circumcision well before they have entered puberty, well before they have begun to identify with their sexuality and with what they do with their genitals. How do we do this? Well, you take a sign, you take a megaphone, you go to a church parking lot, you go across the street from a church parking lot, and when the parents and the children are coming out, you start screaming. You go nuts. You talk about stop cutting baby penis. You talk about how circumcision is baby rape. Infants are being raped every day. Infants are being attacked and mutilated every single day. How dare you? How dare this go on? You go on and you go on and you go on. And you do this for 5 or 10 minutes. Maybe instead you go to, a Little League game. Maybe you go down to the local soccer field. If it's a park, at least in my state, you're free to say whatever you want there, and they can't throw you out. You go down, you do this, And you make it clear to parents that you're going to be dropping by from time to time, and there's nothing they can do about it. And once it becomes clear that there's nothing they can do about it, any parent thinking about circumcising has to seriously ask themselves, do I want to have this conversation with my child? How do I want it to go? Do I want my child to ask, why was my penis cut up? What is this brown ring around my penis? Why did you cut off part of my penis? Or do I want to have the conversation, well, we didn't think it was necessary to cut off part of your penis, and we thought maybe you would want the whole thing. I think it's pretty obvious. I know which one I would choose if I were having a child anytime soon. This threatens the parent-child interface. It is horrifying, that's my bet, to any parent who has circumcised his or her child. This could be huge. Now, that's not the only form that I think this should take. I think we should also start seeding the world with anti-circumcision propaganda. You know, these cards and these flyers explaining what circumcision is and how it hurts people. I went to the library recently, and I dropped maybe 50 cards into different books at in the maternity section of the nonfiction part of the library. And I think that was good. But you know what's scarier? Let's put them in the Captain Underpants books. Let's put them in the children's section. Imagine the horror of a parent, and I don't endorse vandalism or destruction of property, but imagine the horror of a parent reading to his or her child, and they get to the bottom of, the 30th page, and there's this little message scrawled in indelible marker, stop cutting baby penis. And in that moment, the parent is faced with the realization that, oh my God, if I hadn't read this to my child first, if my child were just a little older and able to read this book for himself, I'd be having a conversation about circumcision right now, and I don't know what I'd say. I don't know how I would justify that. That's a scary moment for a parent. And we need to scare these parents. We need these parents to wake up, smell the roses, realize that they are not going to get away with destroying their children's genitals. That's probably not all I'm going to have to say on this topic, but I think it's a start. We need our circumcision Hitler. We need Goebbels. We need people to come forward and scare the bejesus out of everybody, out of society, out of anybody who has any feeling, sentimental feelings about family, about parents and children bonding. Okay? Brian Earp and Taylor and Sorrells, these intellectual researchers, they'll get all the credit, just like Martin Luther King got all the credit for the civil rights movement. But there's some question whether Martin Luther King would have gotten anywhere without Malcolm X threatening race war. Well, what are we going to do? We've tried being Martin Luther King. We've got a lot of Martin Luther Kings walking around in the Intactivist movement. They don't get press coverage. They don't seem to be making much of an impact. Best of luck to them. I propose something different.